Committee will come to order. Thank you all for being here. This hearing, Afghanistan, honoring the heroes of Extortion 17, has been extraordinarily difficult to organize this hearing because it's proved nearly impossible to effectively solicit and subsequently meet the needs and wishes of every family member and loved one that was on board Extortion 17. I want to assure the families that this committee has questioned the Department of Defense officials on the full spectrum of the mission to include extremely sensitive and highly classified information in an effort to fully understand the events pertaining to the tragedy that unfolded that day. We have tried our best to treat all the families' interests equally, knowing that there's a wide range of spectrum and perspectives given the sheer number of people and families that are engaged in this. Two of America's best happen to be from my congressional district in Utah. And a number of members obviously care deeply about this issue. You're going to see members coming and going from this hearing. We have lots of different things happening here in Congress at the same time. Now, some families may claim we have not done enough by not allowing classified or highly graphic information to be discussed today, and others may claim that any discussion about Extortion 17 is counterproductive and opens old wounds. If I did not believe that the majority of the families wanted a forum like this to exist, we would not be conducting this hearing. It is extremely sensitive. There are things that we cannot and will not be discussing in this hearing given the classified nature. And I hope people will understand that. That's the way the United States of America operates, and our first and foremost concern is to make sure that we protect the ongoing lives and operations of the United States military. But I will say that the United States is different than the rest of the world. We are open, we are transparent, we are self-critical, and we do so in a spirit of making things better. I'd also, so today as we start this, I'd like to welcome Ranking Member Tierney and the subcommittee, particularly Congressman Lynch, who's shown a great deal of interest in this. I want to welcome Mr. Ridgel, who's spent a lot of time in this, although not a member of this committee. I appreciate his presence here today. On August 6th of 2011, Taliban insurgents killed 30 American servicemen, including 17 Navy SEALs, making it the largest single-day loss of life in naval special warfare history, and the largest single-day loss of life during the war in Afghanistan. The events that unfolded that night are commonly referred to as Extortion 17, which is the call sign for the helicopter transporting the special operations personnel. We are here today at the request of many of the families of the fallen heroes aboard Extortion 17 to obtain answers to their questions where answers can be found. This hearing also serves to honor the 30 American servicemen aboard Extortion 17 and their families. I've traveled to Afghanistan numerous times, visited with the servicemen and women there, and have nothing but the greatest respect and admiration that are serving our country. Over the course of many months, the committee has had an open and ongoing dialogue with many of the families and servicemen, families of the servicemen aboard Extortion 17. In an effort to find answers to many of the outstanding questions regarding Extortion 17, some concerning the operation, others regarding post-mortem events, we have welcomed the families to communicate their thoughts and concerns with the committee. In addition to attending a funeral of one of the servicemen aboard Extortion 17, I personally met with some of the families of the 30 servicemen to hear their concerns and listen carefully to what questions they had about the tragic event. I offer my deepest condolences to all the families who've lost a loved one as a result of this incredibly tragic event. My heart also goes out to the bigger, broader military family and community because I know how much they care about their colleagues and friends and people that they serve with. It is important as a nation we not forget the service of all the men and women who serve this country. They've served us in the past, they're serving us now, and they will serve us in the future. In advance of this hearing, the committee staff has invited and encouraged families to submit written testimony for the record and to pass on some of their questions that may be directed to the Department of Defense by members of Congress. There is an order and a process to this, which I'm proud to help facilitate. Because the committee takes the concerns of families with great sincerity, for more than 8 months we've been reviewing the facts surrounding Extortion 17. The committee has performed an extensive review of almost 2,000 pages of unclassified material related to Extortion 17. The committee has also met with independent sources with direct and indirect knowledge of the facts surrounding Extortion 17. To address some of the unanswered questions, the committee received briefings, classified and classified, on the operational component leading up to the loss of the 30 servicemen and eight Afghan nationals, and on the post-mortem handling of the 30 American servicemen on Extortion 17. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Department of Defense for their cooperation with the subcommittee in providing answers to many of the questions I have asked and others have asked of the Department. The facts surrounding Extortion 17 are terribly heartbreaking, and we appreciate the candor and willingness to answer difficult questions from both sides of the aisle. The committee has reviewed these facts in a bipartisan way. We've had open, transparent dialogue with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Today, the committee will be specifically looking into whether the remains of U.S. personnel were treated with the proper respect they deserve and whether Department of Defense procedures were followed and sufficient. I strongly believe that every fallen hero deserves to be treated with the proper amount of dignity and respect. If there are concerns calling into question the Department policies, we are here today to have productive discussion and how we can ensure the proper treatment of the remains of the servicemen. I'd like to emphasize it is the intent of the subcommittee to obtain all the available information about the events following the crash of Extortion 17, dispel potential myths, and to learn from the events so we can ensure that proper reforms are implemented. I want to take a moment to recognize the dedication of our loyal servicemen to this country. They maintain the security and the bedrock of our principles. In this vein, I'm greatly saddened that 1,795 U.S. military personnel have given their lives to serve in Afghanistan since September 11, 2001, and 19,665 have been wounded in action during that same time frame. We must pay respect to those men and women and their families and thank them for their service. I personally believe as a community, as a nation, we can do more to help and support and recognize and honor them. At that same time, I want to commend the witnesses, three of which are dressed in uniform, and 2 retired officers for their service to this country, and thank them for appearing before the subcommittee on a very difficult topic. Their heart's in the right place. Having met with them and chatted with them, they serve our nation. We honor them, and we thank you for in attending what is obviously a very difficult topic. But we appreciate your service, and we thank you for being here today. With that, I'd now like to recognize this distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we begin today, I think it's extremely important that we honor the lives of all of our fallen heroes for the untold contributions that they've made to the service of this country and to the families who mourn their losses. We need to remember that not only did we lose 30 great warriors that night on the Afghan battlefield, but the burden is now carried by the families who lost sons and fathers, brothers and husbands. I'd also like to acknowledge that some of the families are here with us today. For you and the other families who couldn't attend today's proceedings, I want to express my profound gratitude for your son's service and also express my condolences for your loss. Mr. Chairman, I understand that there are some out there who strongly believe this hearing is necessary, and there are other families and their representatives who have contacted the subcommittee and expressed grave concern about today's hearing. They've asked for privacy and they seek closure. So I realize that some have more questions about what happened. We should acknowledge that not all of the families affected with this tragedy support these proceedings. And I have confidence, Mr. Chairman, that you'll make all efforts to conduct today's discussion with both dignity and fairness. I think it's also important to acknowledge that earlier this week, senior officials from the Pentagon provided an extensive briefing to members and staff where many questions were asked and answered about the topics that we may not be able to discuss at today's hearing. We also received an unclassified briefing last week on some of the post-operations concerns that you do intend to discuss today. Pentagon officials provided answers to many questions, and I look forward to their testimony today, which I hope may provide some answers to those that are still seeking them. Mr. Chairman, I would also like to acknowledge the distinguished men and women on today's panel. These officials also serve their country. Some have even served in harm's way, and others served as one of the final caretakers of our fallen heroes. During the briefings last week, we heard from these officials just how humbling their work truly is, and is not made any easier by the fact that the fallen heroes are also their comrades. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to conclude by noting that to date we have lost 2,175 brave Americans during the war in Afghanistan and tens of thousands of others who have been wounded and severely debilitated. While we're here today to discuss events surrounding the tragic deaths of 30 brave Americans, let's also take the opportunity to acknowledge the thousands of men and women who have sacrificed and paid the ultimate price in their service to this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request. I would request, Mr. Chairman, that after your remarks and the remarks of the ranking member, that we insert in the record of this hearing at this point the names of those individuals, servicemen, who lost their life in the C-47 Chinook helicopter disaster. And I would ask that that be printed immediately after your remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. I'd like to also thank, again, the members of our subcommittee for attending today. I also like to recognize Mr. Fortenberry from Nebraska, who's been very active and involved and engaged in this issue, and I appreciate his presence here today. I would also remind members that they may have 7 days to submit opening statements for the record. That would be all members, even those that do not serve here on our committee. It's now, at this point, I'd like to recognize our panel. And we have members representing the Pentagon, and we have Mr. Gary P. Reed, who is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict at the United States Department of Defense. Ms. Deborah Skillman is the Director of Casualty and Mortuary Affairs at the United States Department of Defense. We have Colonel John DeVilliers, my apologies, is the Commander of Air Force Mortuary Affairs Operations at the United States Department of Defense. Colonel Kirk Brown is the Director of Army Casualty and Mortuary Affairs at the Mortuary Affairs Operations Center at the United States Department of Defense. And we have Commander Aaron Brodsky is the Director of Navy Casualty Services at the United States Department of Defense. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn before they testify. If you please rise and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. As we have discussed with the Department of Defense, I want our audience, and particularly the families, to know that there are some limitations and things that we can discuss. As I've mentioned, there are certain classified information, certain things about the actual operation itself that we cannot and will not, in a non-classified setting, discuss. That is for the safety and security of the ongoing operations of our U.S. military. It is imperative that we do this so that we do not allow insurgents and other enemies of the United States of America to gain an operational advantage. We will adhere to that. I will assure you that as representatives, that we have had classified briefings, and if we have to have additional classified briefings, we will, so members can ask the questions. The Department of Defense and the witnesses here today understand this. While we have 5 witnesses here today, I believe we're going to have 3 opening statements. So we're going to give great liberty to the fact that some of these have been combined, and I believe we're going to start first with Mr. Reed. Please, go ahead, proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm here in the capacity as a senior defense official with oversight of our special operations. But I'm also here, and I bring to that job my background of 28 years of service in the U.S. Army in the Special Operations Forces, working very closely with the organizations that we'll be talking about today. I'm joined by a team of civilian and military subject matter experts to honor the fallen of Extortion 17 and to answer your questions. The downing of Extortion 17 was a catastrophic and unprecedented tragedy for our nation. As you indicated, Chairman, sadly, since 2001, there have been 1,795 U.S. military personnel killed in action in Afghanistan. Any loss of our warriors is a grim reminder of the tragedies of war, the violence of combat action, and the perilous lives our forces live each day in defense of our nation and our values. Our sadness for their loss, however, cannot be compared to the pain and anguish of our Gold Star families, some of whom are here today. Their sacrifices cannot be measured, and their losses can never be replaced. We are deeply humbled to be in their presence and hope our testimony can answer their questions and in some small measure hope to bring them an additional amount of comfort. Above all, we are here to pay respect to our fallen heroes and pay tribute to their ultimate sacrifice and honor their service. Again, Chairman, as you indicated, on August 5th, 2011, the brave men of Extortion 17 embarked on an important mission, as they had done so many times before. They were part of a highly capable task force that had conducted more than 2,800 operations in Afghanistan in the previous 12 months, using tactics and methods proven in over 10 years of combat against the Taliban and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Tragically, as Extortion 17 was nearing its landing zone, Taliban fighters, hidden in a building, fired 2 or 3 rocket-propelled grenades at close range, leaving the pilot no chance to perform evasive maneuvers. One rocket struck a rotor blade, causing the aircraft to crash almost